Now turning to this, you're looking live at the United States Supreme Court, and right now as we speak, oral arguments are underway in a case that could reshape national regulations on gender treatments for children. The case surrounds an equal protection challenge to Tennessee's ban on different types of gender treatment for minors. 25 states have bans that could be affected, and it will be the first time that the High Court will consider restrictions on puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgery, life-altering surgery for children. The court's decision could also have broader implications for transgender people, including access to restrooms and participation in school sports. But first, let's bring in Justice correspondent David Spunt with more details. David.
Hi, Kaylee. Oral arguments have been underway since 10 o'clock this morning. Shows you how contentious this case is. As you mentioned, the first time the justices have weighed in directly on this controversial issue. The case originates out of Tennessee, involves the treatment like puberty blockers and other hormone therapies. This specific state law bans medical care for transgender adolescents, one of about 24 states with similar measures. In 2023, Donald Trump's campaign promised to ban treatment for adolescents nationally while banning Medicare and Medicaid insurance coverage for such care. Groups for and against the law are outside the Supreme Court. They've been outside the Supreme Court for several hours because, Kaylee, this case will have implications that extend far past the Tennessee borders. This will have a broad effect in all 50 states and go past the walls of a medical facility. Think transgender protections in sports and access to bathrooms. Here's Chloe Cole, an activist against some of this care, who detransitioned. Watch.
To allow them to make a decision that will affect not only the entire course of their development physically, psychologically, and reproductively is completely ridiculous. And it's okay to allow your child to experience this discomfort because it's normal to experience discomfort at the time that you're going through puberty. Everybody goes through it.
LGBTQ groups have eyes on President Biden in his final weeks in office to see if maybe he'll issue some sort of executive order or blanket protection that does not involve what's a fractured Congress right now in Washington. The White House has touted his work with the LGBT community in the past, but many are worried as the Trump administration is coming to town on this issue. We expect a decision from the Supreme Court likely later in the spring when Trump is well underway in office. Back to you.
David, thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I listened to these oral arguments. You have highly competent attorneys. Talk about sharp. You have to be to argue in front of the Supreme Court. I listened to Justice Roberts, Thomas, among others. Definitely the conservative wing of the court seems to be expressing some skepticism of the arguments being made on behalf of transgender surgeries for minors. I do want to rewind to just before these oral arguments. The ACLU attorney who's arguing the case was on CNN and had a statement that I would call eyebrow-raising when you do the math. Listen to this.
These are young people who may have known since they were 2 years old exactly who they are, who suffered for 6, 7 years before they had any relief. And what's happening here, it's not the kids who are consenting to this treatment, it's the parents who are consenting to the treatment. And as a parent, I would say when our children are suffering, we are suffering.
So let's do some math. 2-year-olds who know they want to change their gender. I have had 2 2-year-olds. I don't know how a 2-year-old knows that. And then you add 6 years that they've been struggling. That was advocacy for 8-year-olds having life-altering surgery. And let's pull up the Washington Post KFF poll on this matter. You find 68% of U.S. adults do not think those 10 to 14-year-olds should be able to get this life-altering treatment. I wonder how the nation feels if you change that to, let's say, 8-year-old Tammy.
Yes, and this is the problem. Most of us, if you know children, the tendency here, and I've been arguing against this for years, is for the gay community and other adults who have some sexual issues or sexual frameworks they're dealing with, is to not project it onto children to justify the choices that we are making as adults. And this is what this has been from the beginning. My concern about the Supreme Court goes back to 2020 with the Bostock versus Clayton County decision. And Justice Gorsuch noted, and it was 6-3 regarding discrimination against workplaces, which said, yes, sexual identity or transgenders fit into that framework. His framework was, he used the phrase, if an employer penalizes a person identified as male at birth for traits or actions that it tolerates in an employee identified as female at birth. Now, that is political language taken from the left. It is not scientific. It was using this framework that someone at birth is identifying that baby as one thing or another, meaning that it is fluid. And this is my concern when you're dealing with 2-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, of the assigning or identifying as opposed to it existing through scientific reality. So my concern is, and they're using this case here to say that this is a legitimate aspect regarding small children, little kids, 2-year-olds, et cetera. And we should not. It is a political, it's an ideology. It is political, and children should not be thrown into that volcano.
I want to note that oral arguments just wrapped, so that was about 2 hours and 30 minutes on the needle. About, if my mind serves me correctly, Roe v. Wade, the arguments there and the Dobbs decision ran about that long. So they have just wrapped. And Emily, I want to bring up a point that I think is very, very, very important. I believe science matters. I believe facts matter. Europe has followed the science on this issue. United States, we've been wrapped around political arguments. So I want to bring in some of the science. This is International Review of Psychiatry. Listen to this closely. The conclusion from studies that have been conducted is that children with gender dysphoria strongly associated later in life with a lesbian, gay, or bisexual outcome. In the majority of children, 85.2%, the gender dysphoric feelings remitted around or about puberty. In other words, 85% of kids who thought they had gender dysphoria and wanted to change their gender ended up not. 85% around puberty. I want to make this personal. As someone who has had a bilateral mastectomy because I have a high risk of cancer, it is a life-altering surgery. You cannot reverse it. Removing your ovaries, Chloe Cole made this point, no 5-year-old, 10-year-old, 15-year-old should go through menopause at that age. Why are we doing life-altering procedures on 85% of children who may change their mind?
And why are states stepping in loco parentis and acting as parents to those who are seeking sanctuary with that decision from a parent that seeks only to protect the children's biological body? It is absolutely aberrant. I want to make this point for viewers, that the current administration's Department of Justice filed a brief in this case. Out of nowhere, they decided to join in. And I just want to make sure everyone understands that it is the current administration's Department of Justice that seeks to weigh in and support the mutilation and the butchering irreversibly of these children. And that January 20th cannot come fast enough, because with the new administration they will seek to restore not only law and order, but also the foundation of biology in the protection of the family unit, the protection of children's whims. Because absolutely what children explore and feel and think are all over the spectrum. And if we can't trust the kids to vote, to drive, to do things obviously we don't, to smoke, why do we think we can trust them with an irreversible biological butchering, to say the least? But this is Biden's DOJ that just weighed in on this case.
Yeah, and I want to bring in, I want to bring in Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. She drew a questionable comparison between children having life-altering surgery and interracial marriage. Listen to this.
What?
Oh my God.
Well, and I think I thought what was most interesting about the potential comparison to Loving is that in that case, everyone seemed to concede up front that a racial classification was being drawn by the statute. That was sort of like the starting point. The question was whether it was discriminatory because it applied to both races and it wasn't, necessarily invidious or whatever. But, as I read the statute here, the case here, the court starts off by saying that Virginia is now one of 16 states which prohibit and punish marriages on the basis of racial classifications. And when you look at the structure of that law, it looks in terms of, you can't do something that is inconsistent with your own characteristics. It's sort of the same thing. So it's interesting to me that we now have this different argument, and I wonder whether Virginia could have gotten away with what they did here by just making a classification argument the way that Tennessee is in this case.
Harris, Ketanji Brown Jackson is a brilliant, brilliant jurist. However, I have heard members of The View or other media outlets make arguments that somehow interracial marriage is compromised because of a reversal in Roe v. Wade. It seems to me a huge stretch and a leap.
Well, if you're talking about protecting children who literally cannot make medical decisions, as Emily pointed out, there are a whole lot of decisions we don't give them the wheel for. That is one of them. If your goal is to protect children, then that's separate. I'm in a biracial marriage. I'm in an ecumenical marriage. If we're protecting children, how is that going to jeopardize me and Tony?
Right.
If you're telling me that children are at hand here. Puberty blockers, by the way, one of the #1 drugs is meant to treat prostate cancer. Can you imagine if you put that in a little one's body? Dr. Siegel has said it makes your bones brittle. It stops you from growing the right way. We don't know what it does to the brain yet. It can't possibly help mental health. We've seen a suppressed report that's part of this whole case as well about that, about the effects of puberty blockers. I mean, the goal is to protect the kids. But I'm going to take this in a place that I know I'll get criticism from. I don't care. This is about spirituality as well. When we are born, God decides who we are. You get XX, you get XY. And if you want gender fluidity, it's got to come at a time when you can actually understand and express it. And I'm here to tell you a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old can't do that. So why in the world are we messing with God's creation at that point?
Jimmy.
Good point. To the statement made earlier about the 2-year-old needing an advocate. If your 2-year-old is trans or trapped in the wrong body, it's because you've convinced them they are. Okay?
Correct.
As a parent of one child, I can tell you, if you're blessed with the gift of a child, you've taken a MacBook Air out of the packing peanuts, and you're responsible for the direction it takes in life. All right?
Yeah, I mean, my 2-year-old doesn't know what he wants to eat for dinner. He throws it on the floor. He's hardly qualified to decide to change his gender.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.